Hello, everyone. This is David Politis. I'm the founder and CEO of Better Cloud, and I'd like to welcome you today to a very special edition of our Cloud IT webinar series. The title of today's presentation is How the Unique Challenges of Cloud Application Adoption Are Redefining the Role of IT. And this is a special presentation, really, because we have a analyst, Andrew Reichman from one of the top analyst firms, 451 Research, joining us today. And this is the first time we've done this on this webinar series, where we've brought a top analyst on the webinar to speak with our community. And this is a report that we put together. So a few months ago, we partnered with 451 Research to put together this report on the impact of cloud applications on the role of IT. And the findings are really interesting. I mean, they're not completely unexpected, but the detail that we went into and the way that you're going to see the data, the graphs, the charts, and the conclusions that they draw are pretty compelling. And I think that, again, the format and the professionalism that we have here, you're going to be able to take this report back to your organizations and use this, whether it be to lobby for change or to train people in your organizations, or just to have a sense of where you stand against your peers. And I think that in this modern IT world, that it's there's not a lot of data like this available. So hopefully everyone enjoys this and finds this useful. And so today we're lucky to be joined by the author of this particular report, Andrew Reichman. He'll be sharing his in-depth analysis on the findings of the survey. He's a cloud research director at 451 Research and has a pretty extensive background when it comes to cloud IT. Today, Andrew is really focused at 451 Research around creating and interpreting quarterly surveys and exploring cloud adoption in the enterprise technology market. But before that, he was actually at Amazon. Andrew was overseeing the efforts around marketing infrastructure as a service at Amazon Web Services to enterprise firms all over the world. And before that, he spent 6 years as a principal analyst at Forrester, covering storage, cloud, data center, and before that, he was at Accenture and spent his time there really looking at EMC data centers and environments and how to optimize those. So Andrew has spent years studying the impact of cloud applications on businesses, and for the survey, we wanted him to explore the impact of cloud applications not on the businesses themselves, but more importantly on the IT professionals. And that's really what this is about. I'm just going to repeat that again, is that this is the purpose of this is really to look at the impact of these cloud applications on you, the IT professional. And there is data we've put out around how it impacts the business. Of course, all the analyst firms are doing that kind of work, but we want to talk about how it impacts your role and your day-to-day job. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Andrew. And again, thank you very, very much for attending today. We're excited to have you.
Great, thanks so much. This is Andrew Reichman here. As David mentioned, I am the research director at 451 for cloud data collection, where we do really try and understand all of the ins and outs of public, private, hybrid cloud usage in the enterprise, ranging from SaaS and PaaS and infrastructure as a service and on-prem private cloud, hosted private cloud, all of the types of cloud usage. And the other thing here is a lot of studies and a lot of views of cloud focus on technology features and functions and what you're going to migrate to. And it was a pretty interesting remit on this project to think about, less about what the technology tools are and more about the impact. And as David mentioned, not the impact to the business, where we know that there can be economic impacts of cloud and there can be agility impacts of cloud and geographic impacts, but this is much more on the day-to-day impact of how IT people do their work and how the usage of cloud-based applications can really help to make things better, and if so, exactly how. But also, what are the drawbacks? What are some of the issues that IT organizations are struggling with when they try and transition to cloud, and how can that be improved? How can things get better? One thing that we've talked about is cloud represents an opportunity to clean the slate and start over. But in the end, we're still solving complex business problems. And so some of the issues that existed pre-cloud, now as people get further along in their adoption, are starting to crop up again in the cloud environments. And so that was something that we wanted to look at. So, no surprise to anybody on the line here, if you guys are involved in cloud and looking at the way that cloud can change business, this idea of consumerization is probably nothing new. IT had been running in a very walled off and monolithic way where organizations had few choices. And what we've seen happen is that some of the innovations on the consumer side of technology usage, things like the iPhone or using Airbnb or Uber to get access to consumer services in a different way through technology, personal usage of Gmail and Dropbox and Spotify, all of these are fundamental changes in how individuals get access to information and use products and really run their lives. And what we've seen is once business professionals and IT professionals have gotten a taste of this in their consumer personal life, we see that there is now this sort of unstoppable demand to be able to get some of that flexibility and high quality user experience, a positive, enjoyable experience in the tools that they consume at work and in the tools that they deploy at work. And IT organizations have realized that you can't just say no to that demand. Once line of business marketers or product people or executives have an awareness that that's possible, it's really difficult to simply say no and to say, no, we're going to provide you with one solution and it's going to be old and clunky and that's all you get. And, that has given rise to a lot of usage of shadow IT, people in businesses going to use things like Dropbox or Gmail because the tools provided to them by IT aren't flexible enough, aren't good enough. And so what we've seen over and over again is if IT doesn't provide better options, consumers now are simply going to go get them themselves. And so that's given rise to a melding of the two, where in order to give business consumers the tools that they want, they've got to, they're either going to do it themselves or IT has to provide a safe, process-controlled way to consume services like that. And so that's where we've really seen many, many more organizations adopting cloud-based solutions and moving away from the more monolithic, clunky old tools that they had in the past. So that's really what we're trying to do with this study, is understand some of the business benefits, but especially what are the specific business benefits to end users, business people, and what are some of the benefits to IT administrators in being able to do a better job and be more happy, be more capable, learn new things because they're using cloud solutions. And what are some of the issues that they're facing? What could make it work better? What could further improve that experience? So this is really very much focused on experience. We fielded a survey it ended up being 269 respondents, and every one of those respondents were currently using some cloud office solution and have to be using either Google or Microsoft Office 365 in addition, potentially, to other solutions. So we did restrict the survey to those that already use one or both of those two solutions. In terms of demographics, so I'll just give you, so that we can level set and understand exactly who we're talking to and where this data comes from. It's about half of the respondents were in organizations that we consider to be enterprise, having more than 1,000 employees, and then another half that are below that enterprise cutoff. We didn't talk to any companies that have less than 100 employees, so this is a fairly enterprise-centric, and it's pretty well distributed among those size bands of organizations. In terms of industry verticals, these are the standard industry vertical segmentations that we use in all of our studies, and as you can see, it's pretty well distributed across all of those. Information being the biggest, and in general, information sector that includes makers of software, makers of movies, news outlets, telecommunications companies. These are the companies that we generally see as the highest and fastest adopters of cloud today and having very strong predictions for cloud usage going forward. Although, as we're going deeper into a more widespread adoption of cloud in general, we're starting to see it have strong uptake and strong predictions across all industry segments, including the more conservative ones like manufacturing and utilities and retail, where they are in need of improvements to remain competitive within their industries. In terms of individual, everybody in the study is a manager or above, so we really wanted to go to the people that are decision makers and that really understand the impact of these things, and so we wanted to find out people that see day-to-day what's going on in IT, but that have the strategic view to understand the impacts and to really get it. So we asked people, predominantly they are decision makers, and then a smaller segment influence those decisions in terms of what technologies are purchased and how they're deployed. So as we said, everybody uses either Microsoft Office 365 or Google Apps, Google for Work. It is a bigger segmentation that uses Office 365. A little bit around 2/3 are Microsoft compared to about 1/3 for Google, and that's pretty typical with what we see out in the world today. Microsoft has a bigger footprint, and in general sees more transition from more continuity and transition from what they use today. Really interesting thing, when we ask people how many different cloud apps they use, as you can see from this chart, 11% use more than 100 different cloud apps. The median is using 31 different apps that are based in cloud. So it's a pretty big number. It's a pretty big spread of things that people do in the cloud. It's a very small number. Only 1% say that they use only one cloud app. So that's a good thing in some ways, where you could see that there are more features and functions and business functions being delivered through cloud. But the downside of it is that there's a lot of complexity associated with that many different things being run in cloud. While Microsoft and Google are in play for all of these organizations that responded to the survey, they are dealing with lots of different vendors, lots of different tool sets, many points of integration or data migration from what they used in the past. And so as we'll see later, this high number of cloud apps also leads to complexity. So what are they doing in cloud? It's pretty widely distributed across a lot of the things that often were in the Microsoft realm, right? File storage and email are the two top. Document collaboration, which probably pre-cloud, most organizations were using SharePoint, was by far the widest used document collaboration platform. Some companies do use Documentum and other what I would call more heavyweight collaboration tool sets, but in general, I see those much more in highly regulated environments like pharmaceutical or drug research, legal environments, where there has to be this very high level of classification of documents and pretty high governance and control. Most general purpose organizations, in my experience, have used a smattering of SharePoint and even sort of homegrown, just simple file folder sharing, or even the usage of email as a way to share files and collaborate with others around those files. So, in some ways this is going to be a transition. In some ways this is going to be an improvement for people. So as I said, Microsoft is kind of the legacy vendor in many cases, although when you're talking about file storage, Certainly, EMC and NetApp may be being displaced by some of this as things move towards Google File Storage, Microsoft File Storage, or things like Dropbox and Box. So those pick up some of these. But and it's interesting to see, the voice and messaging and calendaring, a lot of acquisitions happening in that space as the cloud vendors are trying to put together a comprehensive solution that includes all of those features and functions. So first off, how effective are these tools, right? We asked the respondents to tell us or to rate the achievement of specific categories of benefits in terms of they're fully achieved, they did everything that they wanted to get done by moving to cloud, they're partially achieved, or they did not achieve this particular benefit. And as you can see, the gray bar that shows not achieved is pretty small, right? No category did more than 10% of the respondents say that they did not achieve that goal. It's highest in terms of freeing up time to drive innovation, and that of these is kind of the vaguest, the hardest to quantify of these different attributes, these different desired benefits. And it's not significantly higher in terms of not achieved than the others. And when it comes to fully achieved, they all focus right there around in that high 40s to mid 40% range, with reducing the level of effort associated with IT seems to be the most consistently achieved, the category with the highest fully achieved. Interesting to see that the one drop-off there is around saving money. It may not be, I think a lot of people get hung up on thinking about cloud as the cheaper option, the way to, reduce hardware costs or licensing costs. And, one aspect is it may not be cheaper. Organizations may choose to do this because of the flexibility benefit, even if they're not going to dramatically save money, or maybe if they won't even save money at all, although only 8% say that they didn't achieve that objective at all. But I will say it's also a very difficult comparison. Very few organizations, even among the largest organizations that I speak to in the Fortune 5 or Fortune 10, don't always have at their fingertips the TCO of these types of workloads. They don't know what it costs in terms of power, cooling, data center, software, hardware, people time spent on this, and the licensing costs projected out over the lifetime of that application's deployment. And so, when it comes to saving money, it may be that they actually get better transparency and better visibility of how much it costs them because they're going to pay a bill for essentially all of those things in one place. And so I actually see that even if saving money is hard to quantify or might not be fully realized in every case, the fact that you have much more transparency to what it costs you to run these applications is a significant benefit. So then we looked at IT admin benefits specifically. What does it allow IT admins to do? And it really focuses mainly on the reduced maintenance activity and increased flexibility that comes to these IT admins. When you get down into some of these lower ones, better connection with the business, increased collaboration, and better satisfaction. Those are what I would call softer benefits, a little bit harder to quantify. And it seems that, those aren't the ones that people point to the most. But that said, even if a smaller percentage of those benefits were realized, the impact of those, the potential impact is huge, right? If IT can connect better with customers and improve customer experience and drive better results and lead to better clarity of requirements, to me, that is the most fundamental challenge that I hear from all of the IT people that I talk to over all of the years that I've been doing this. The challenges are much more cultural and communication and human challenges than is there a technology that can solve this problem. And so even a modest improvement of some of these things I think can really have a tremendous impact. And then the other thing to think about is it's kind of an option game here. It's not necessarily that you're gaining things that you know about, it's what you don't know about. How can you solve problems and lead to better results by putting these things in place? What could people do if they had more time? What could people do if they had better communication and they really understood the business objectives? How could they then be more creative? And I think having SaaS applications in place that allow them not to focus on racking and stacking and upgrading and refreshing, then what's possible? And you might not even know that. You might not even see the result or the benefit of that for years to come, but they really can be transformational to the business and to the day-to-day life of the IT people that are serving the business. In terms of end user benefits, we really see a similar thing. It's more about, or the most common responses are in the things that they see most immediately. It allows people to work from anywhere. It allows people to synchronize across many devices and collaborate more effectively. This one, reduce dependency on email to share information. I think that's such a common behavior, to email yourself something so that you can then get to it while you're on vacation, or so that you can get to it from any device. And I think that that's a creative way to solve a real problem, but it's not an elegant way, and it's not a secure way. It's not a space efficient way. It's clunky. And so I think that that's what we're seeing is those behaviors changing slowly over time, but the impact being significant. And I think in general, what we see is that end users are fairly happy with what they get from cloud apps. The results are pretty good. They're not spending time on, or they're spending less time on things that don't add value. There's less frustration and more effective collaboration, more effective access and usage of data. And we asked, how suited are these office solutions to enterprise needs? And for the most part, the vast majority say that it's either very well suited or well suited. And I think that this will continue to grow. Part of the barrier here, I think, is not necessarily in the solution itself, but in the way that it's deployed, the way that the data is migrated into the new solution, and then the kind of retraining that has to happen for users to be able to get the most out of it. I think there's always a period where there's some frustration from using a new tool, and it's only as people get to be more expert with it that they start to say, yeah, this really does serve my needs better. They might not really know whether it does or it doesn't for some time. In terms of Google versus Microsoft, this is an area where we did see a difference in the suitability to enterprise needs. There was a bit of a spike in terms of more Google users saying that it suits their needs very well, but the well bar was about the same for both. So I think that that's where, it's a little bit surprising to me in terms of thinking of Microsoft as a more mature solution. It's been around longer and been addressing enterprise needs for longer, but it seems that there may be some amount of higher satisfaction with the elegantness of the solution or the intuitiveness of the solution when it comes to Google. And I think you'd also say that it's a bigger transition. And so there's higher likelihood for high satisfaction when you're cleaning the slate and going to something brand new. I think Google does a pretty good job of making a easy to use and effective solution. Whereas Microsoft may carry over some of the headaches and heartaches that have been seen in the past with people that have been using it for a long time. We asked about reduced level of effort associated with specific tasks within IT. And interestingly, for all respondents, there was a minimal level of effort for every one of these in the post-cloud world. And so this graph shows the percentage of respondents who said that the effort went down. We asked them to rate it on a 4-point scale. So for some, they might have said that it was minimal before cloud and it's minimal after cloud, but pretty much everybody said that the level of effort is either minimal or none once they got to cloud. And so, the biggest one is around storage, and I'm not surprised to see that. I've covered storage for a long time, and I know how onerous the tasks can be to do day-to-day quota capacity inventory management around storage resources. as well as to do the backup and recovery and reliability that's required for what really is every enterprise's biggest asset, which is their data. And so it seems quite clear that giving people a more flexible tool set and a more elastic tool set to manage their data has allowed IT to spend less time doing those fairly technical storage functions that can really take a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort that seems to be pretty well improved after they've moved to cloud. Upgrades and software management and installation, all of those things are what I think of as pretty mundane tasks that take a lot of time but don't really add a ton of value. That does seem to be pretty significantly improved when organizations move these to cloud. So then we asked, what did you learn since you've moved to cloud? And it's interesting that the top two are sort of, we learned more about cloud because we're using more cloud, and so no surprise there. That's kind of the most immediate thing that happens. And when you get into some of the more connection to the business and understanding the business better, and the real needs around security and business requirements, those are a little bit less frequent, but I think that those are things that take more time. The security one is pretty interesting because definitely here a dichotomy when people say, is cloud more secure or less secure than what we do today? And I would say that it's really this understanding the security needs that are holding back people from saying that cloud is more secure. My personal opinion, I think cloud can be fundamentally more secure because of more experience among the cloud providers of mitigating more threats, higher level of expertise, and more simple scale. Allows you to be more secure. And I think a lot of the cloud applications are fundamentally built for shared tenancy and for a threat mitigation landscape compared to what was built in legacy, where a lot of organizations simply felt, because it's running in a walled-off data center, it's not going to be a target. But as we've seen over and over again, that's not really the case. That said, though, the existing governance processes around security don't always translate effectively or easily to cloud, and so I think that cloud can be deployed and used in an unsecure way. So I think it'll be interesting to see if that number goes up over time, if more IT people say that they are better versed in security and start to incorporate knowledge and understanding of security practices and requirements in their day-to-day jobs because they're using cloud. That I think will then start to swing the pendulum around to people saying that cloud actually can be much more secure and provide better results to the business as that familiarity starts to translate over. Then the other piece is, again, talking about this connection to business, being in better touch with what the business needs and how to fulfill their requirements and provide an excellent experience to internal business consumers of IT. I think that is going to come over time. DevOps is something that's slowly being adopted, but I think will provide that better connection between building and managing applications and the infrastructure that runs it. And so, as I think those are all things that will take more time, but have the potential to be tremendously valuable as they come into place. When we ask about pain points, here is where, again, security crops up. And in my mind, it's less that cloud apps can't be secure, although there certainly, is the potential to use a cloud app, if you don't vet and choose carefully the vendors and the infrastructure choices that they've made to power their cloud. There can be cloud applications that are inherently insecure, but I think for the most part, the issues with security are less about inherent flaws in the product itself and much more around, do we govern the way they're used effectively? Me personally, I've had multiple companies where Dropbox was deployed in a shadow IT context. Individuals had set up Dropbox usage and extended rights to see that data to individuals within the company, and then when I've left those companies, that access was never shut off. So that's a really tangible example of how, it's not that Dropbox doesn't have security controls and doesn't have the ability to shut off access when people are no longer with the company. But if they're deployed in an insecure way outside of the processes and governance of the organization, it's very easy to create a security gap. And so I think that's what needs to happen most, is addressing those gaps and deploying these in a very consistent, process-controlled way. And clearly, based on this, that's not quite there yet. So I think that as we get from new, exciting deployment of cloud and we get to more mature, ongoing usage within an enterprise context, we're going to see much more attention paid to that with the help of third parties and both integrators and potentially third-party tools that can go do audits and improve the capabilities of some of the offerings themselves. It's common that these migration issues crop up. I think that that's interesting to see, and not too surprising that integration and migration are pretty high on this list. I've definitely heard organizations tell me that their ability to migrate legacy data into their SaaS applications when they switch over to them can either be clunky and difficult, or in some cases not even possible, leading to some pretty difficult behaviors where you have sharded data. You can see the new stuff in the SaaS console that you're using, but the old data that was created in the pre-cloud application might not be visible, might not be available, and you have to do some gymnastics to be able to see both side by side. And so I think that can be a real barrier, and that's something that I think needs to be addressed more effectively as the cloud usage becomes more and more mature. 7% said that they have no pain points. That's a pretty small number. It seems that clearly, while cloud is exciting and has lots of benefits and can add agility and flexibility and reduce cost in some cases, it's still complicated, right? We're still dealing with complicated enterprise use cases that, it's not always easy to solve these problems. And so it's important to resist thinking of cloud as this panacea that's going to solve everything immediately. How much interaction is there between the new cloud solution and the old stuff that was in place before? And only about half of the respondents here say that their cloud solutions interact with what they had in the past. It's not a terrible number. There is half of the people say that they do have interaction, although what we didn't do was dig into the next click down on this would be how effective is that integration? How hard was it to put in place, and how seamless is it? So even among that 50%, I would imagine that there's still some issues. 4% say that they've completely gone all cloud and therefore there is no integration necessary. So that's a very small number for the vast majority of these enterprise respondents. Some amount of integration is needed with the legacy stuff that they had in the past, and for half of them, that integration is not in place. So I think that's something that really needs to be improved, and I think that's going to be one of the big on the project list for any organization that's using cloud today is how can we get this better sorted where we have seamless view, effective capabilities between everything that we use. How much productivity impact is there? I mean, we did have 67% of people say that they can get things done more quickly, and more than half saying that they can satisfy end user needs better. When you get down into some of the softer stuff, I'm more motivated and engaged, more time on innovation, that stuff that maybe comes over time, or who knows, maybe that's something that's unrealistic to expect to come with this. And it did have 22% of the response base say that they really haven't seen that much productivity improvement since they've moved to cloud. The hope is that this will continue to improve over time, although there's also the risk that as there's a bit of a sprawl of more and more cloud applications deployed and more effort associated with keeping it all safe and reliable and effective, and as there's more integration, it may well be that we start to drift back towards what we saw in the past, where these cloud applications that were shiny and new and represented a clean slate where there was no legacy data and no legacy configurations to worry about, as they start to age, it may be that some of the benefits associated with cloud start to erode. So, finally, just to summarize, certainly see in this data set respondents pointing to some pretty significant benefits, predominantly around reduced time on mundane tasks, more time to do things that actually contribute to business effectiveness and IT effectiveness, rather than just racking, stacking, upgrading, and refreshing. Better collaboration, better communication between IT and the business, although it does seem that there's still room for that to grow further. And some amount of improved cost structure. There is a decent number of people who say that they save money by moving to cloud, but I would think of that not as the primary benefit. Based on what I see in this data and the conversations that I have over time, it seems that the if you're only looking at cost, I think you're missing some of the point. The agility, the flexibility, the ability to grow quickly to meet business needs, to try things with a low cost of failure. All of those, I think, from what I hear, are more significant than the strict economic benefit of cloud. Security does remain an issue, and I think that's something that especially early adopters that maybe didn't give it enough thought need to go back and think about, okay, is this really as secure as we need it to be? Do we have the right processes in place? Have we audited it and feel confident that we're not leaving loopholes and issues? And then the other one is integration. I think those are the two that really need to increase maturity to get the full benefits realized. And then, we're clearly continuing to march on this. More and more companies are using them. There are very few companies that say they don't use cloud today, and we're just seeing it go further and further. So thank you very much. And with that, I'll hand it back to David for a quick poll, and then we can have an open discussion.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew. And we have about 6 minutes left in terms of the scheduled time, but I do want to get these polls asked. So everyone who's on here, I'm going to put a poll up in front of you. And so the question is, does your IT organization evaluate on-premise options when looking for a new application or technology? So if you can just go ahead and submit your answer here. We're actually going to show the answer to this poll to everyone. So if you can just quickly go ahead and submit. We have 2 poll questions, and then I'm going to get to some of the questions that you asked while Andrew was presenting. So it's interesting. I actually I thought that this number was going to be I thought that the number was going to be lower from a yes perspective. My feeling was that with a lot of the vendors that we've seen, they're pushing so much on cloud. It's actually hard even to evaluate their on-premises options because they've pushed their SKUs and everything so hard to the cloud. But I think that is why we do these polls.
Yeah, David, I think that's a pretty high number of no. To me, those who say no, that makes them really cloud first or maybe even cloud only. And that's a much higher number than I would have seen a year or two ago. Although I will probably say that many on the webinar today are probably pretty cloud centric.
Right.
That could explain some of that high number. But it's not the majority that say no, but I think it's a pretty significant number.
Absolutely. So let me throw up the next poll just quickly. So do you believe any of your former employees have access to company data due to the rise of SaaS applications and shadow IT? So again, if everyone can just jump in here quickly and answer. I think this is really interesting because this is something that I believe, and we've seen it here, we've seen it at other companies that are our customers. This is a challenge people are having. As you mentioned, Andrew, with the sprawl of applications, it's also sprawl of data, sprawl of access, and so it'd be interesting to see how people feel about this. So we'll just wait for a couple more people here to jump in and vote. So here, again, yes, this one I expected actually the yes to be higher. It all really depends on the number of SaaS applications that you're using, but clearly. This is one of the big challenges I think that everyone's going to face is the data. Data is now living kind of all over the place. I mean, all the different devices and all these different applications, and maybe a department is using some applications that's not IT approved, and they don't have a good process for deprovisioning people and removing that data access. So this is
Yeah, it's kind of a scary number, right? If 46% of our audience knows that this is happening, right? Former employees having access to company data. I mean, that's a problem. The 16% that doesn't know, that means that it may well be the case too. So it's a pretty big number to me. That's a big concern.
So just quickly, there's a couple questions that came in. So the first is in terms of, so working with 30 SaaS services takes time to manage them efficiently and securely. Can you see a time when we can have one vendor providing all the SaaS services we might desire?
Hard to say. I mean, sure, it's definitely a trend towards consolidation in the industry where very big vendors are building their portfolio. Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, all these different players acquiring. But one thing that we talked about, you and I, David, earlier, is that as these companies acquire more solutions, they're not always necessarily stitched together very effectively. So even if you do have everything coming from one vendor, you might not get the goal that you were hoping for, where everything is very consistent and easy to manage. Maybe you're only paying one bill to one vendor, but it might be lots of different tool sets and lots of different panels where you're managing things. So that can be a challenge too. And maybe there'll be bigger vendors, but there'll probably always be smaller vendors that have little bits and pieces of solutions. SaaS is a very fragmented market, and so I would say for most companies, unless they truly value a single vendor approach, the likelihood is that integrating and managing multiple vendor solutions is going to be a reality for some time going forward.
So another question here, Andrew, was there any major difference when you were looking at the data between Google and Microsoft respondents?
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I would have expected I would have seen more Google among small companies and more Microsoft among big companies, just by virtue of who most enterprises are already working with Microsoft, and as they transition, especially things like email, where they have most experience in Exchange, that there would be a trend of that. But it really didn't shake out that way. It was a pretty equal in terms of size bands, and whether they use, within those size bands, how the percentages broke out. There's seeming to be a little bit more satisfaction, especially when it came to features, functions, elegance among Google users compared to Microsoft. And that's interesting, especially given that Microsoft had a higher level of familiarity, likely, when people transitioned from legacy version of Microsoft solutions to a cloud version of Microsoft solutions. It was probably more consistent than converting from whatever they had to go to Google. But so it seems that maybe Google does have the edge when it comes to how quickly somebody could digest and become expert in a new platform. So those were the main things that we saw in terms of differences. But for the most part, the data wasn't that different. It seems that the experience is pretty similar.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. It looks like we said we'd close off at 2:45, so we're a little bit over. I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended today. Thank you, Andrew, for presenting and putting this together. And we look forward to seeing everyone at the next installment of our Cloud IT webinar series.